Whilst our own death seems inconceivable, try to imagine the death of a child. It's simply something against nature, something that doesn't seem fair or credible to us, and which doesn't fall within our expectations of life. This is the story of Roberta, a woman who at a very young age had a daughter, whom she decided to name Raiza. The little girl was the product of the enormous love that Roberta had for Miguel, her beloved partner. Despite the fact that they were both very young, they decided to emigrate abroad in search of a better future for their daughter, without imagining what would become of them. Roberta had known Miguel since they were teenagers. They both worked helping their parents. On her side, Roberta helped her mother in a restaurant that she had, and Miguel helped his father who had a small shop. They went together to the same school, and from there grew their closeness. They spent their recess hours together, they were best friends, and they always shared their most precious secrets with each other. With the passing of the years, the friendship they had was transformed into a solid, beautiful, pure and sincere love. When they turned 19, they decided to have a formal relationship, and they were both happy because the love that they had built had solid foundations. Their parents didn't oppose the relationship. On the contrary, they supported their children and believed that if at some point they were wrong, they would always be there to help them. When the economic situation in the country became difficult, Roberta and Miguel's parents lost their businesses. Their children only had the option of looking for jobs to help their parents. The months passed and the situation in the country did not improve. When suddenly, Roberta surprised Miguel with the news of her pregnancy. It was not among their plans to become parents yet. However, they decided to take the news as something positive, because the fruit of the great love they had for each other was on the way. Upon hearing this news, their parents felt that it was not the right time for them to have children, and they let the couple know it. However, this wasn't an obstacle for them, as they were determined to bring forward that child who was on the way. Roberta and Miguel, despite their great efforts, were unable to save money for the birth of their little one. The conditions in which they lived were precarious. They had moved to a room that they rented because they didn't want to be the cause for concern for their parents. When Roberta gave birth to their baby, she turned out to be a beautiful little girl who was given the name Raiza, which meant living without worries, and that was what they wanted for their daughter. Not to worry what would happen later, they wanted to forge a promising future for her. The first months of the little girl's life were hard for her parents. They didn't earn enough money to cover all the needs of their daughter. After talking a lot, they made the decision to emigrate to another country with their daughter. All this solely in search of a better future. Miguel had a contact that would help him achieve this, but they had to raise money so that he, along with his wife Roberta and his daughter, could leave. Despite the fact that Miguel and Roberta both worked hard, they couldn't get enough money. This is why they made the decision to speak with their parents to see if they could get a loan of the money they needed. When they managed to settle down, they intended to pay each of their parents back down to the last bill that they would borrow. Their parents didn't agree with what they were planning to do. However, they decided to support their children by lending them the money so that they could have the option to leave. They already had everything ready to start another life. They managed to migrate to another country safely. Miguel started looking for work and found it. Despite not having a higher education, he got a job as a construction worker, in which he was very well paid. Everything seemed to indicate that this life and that of his family was improving for the better. Little Raiza began to grow bigger and bigger. When she was 2 years old, her mother Roberta made the decision to start working in order to generate more income for the home. In the morning, she would drop Raiza off at a nursery near her work as a hairdresser. The economic situation in her home had improved considerably. Miguel was well paid in his work, and Roberta enjoyed a fixed salary that would help her save money to later start establishing her own business. However, little Raiza began to behave strangely. She no longer had the same appetite as before, and above all, she didn't even want to get out of bed. Her mother thought that she would soon become ill, but was unsure what to do. The days continued to pass, and the attitude of the little girl was the same. She didn't want to go to nursery, she didn't want to eat, and she just wanted to sleep all day. Roberta told Miguel about what happened. He replied that Raiza might have a lack of vitamins, so they went to the pharmacy to buy nutritional supplements for their child. When Roberta began to give her daughter these supplements, she noticed that now she had more appetite. Despite the girl's refusal to go to nursery, Roberta always ended up taking her though, because she had to go to work and there was no other option for her since she had already missed several days while taking care of Raiza at home. They didn't give much importance to the ailments that Raiza suffered until suddenly, one day at home, the little girl collapsed unexpectedly. Right away, her parents rushed her to the hospital so they could check her. When they got there, the doctors informed them her defences were low. Adding to this, the dehydration that she had from not having eaten as she should during the last few days. And all these factors had been the cause of Raiza being ill and out of balance. She then needed to undergo a series of analyses. Her parents immediately agreed to the test being carried out. Roberta reproached herself for not having paid more attention to her daughter, because if perhaps she brought her to the hospital immediately, this may not have happened. When the doctors arrived with the results, they informed her that everything seemed to indicate that Raiza had a very aggressive leukemia. Her parents were dismayed at the news, because they felt that, except for the days that she had been ill, they were always feeding the little girl regularly. The doctors explained that it was not always a lack of nutrition, that the organism had an influence. According to what they told them, it was very likely that Raiza had an immune deficit, for which they would indicate a series of treatments to help the little girl to a speedy recovery. As a result, Roberta decided to stop working to dedicate herself completely to her daughter. Miguel would continue to work to support his family. Roberta regularly took the girl to the sessions she had in the hospital, hoping that she would react satisfactorily. She became very rigorous in feeding her, but above all, she gave her a lot of love and understanding to be able to help her cope with all the tragic moments she was going through. During that time she had in hospital, the doctor informed her that unfortunately Raiza wasn't reacting well to the treatment, so they would change her medication to a stronger and more aggressive one, which they hoped would work. The new medication that Raiza would receive left her totally weak. She spent all day sleeping and she could barely wake to eat. When her parents saw her, they suffered greatly. They did not understand what they could have done so wrong in life for their child to suffer this much. The weeks continued to pass, and during the next checkup, the doctor informed them that it seemed to indicate Raiza's system was accepting the medicine in a positive way. They saw this as a slight improvement. Her parents replied that they had noticed their daughter was all day unresponsive. She seemed unconscious, but the doctor told them this was all part of the medical reaction. They had to pray for everything to improve, because this time it wasn't only about the medicine. Roberta continued to give Raiza the same treatment, but she was getting weaker and weaker before their eyes. One day Raiza suddenly fainted. She was immediately taken by her parents to the hospital. There, the doctor informed them that the little girl had suffered a relapse and that the next few hours would decide whether she would survive. The couple waited in anguish for the little girl to finally react. Hours passed, but Raiza didn't wake up. She had gone into a coma. Her parents were devastated. They didn't understand how someone so small and defenseless could suffer so much. Hours later, Raiza passed away. Her parents decided to give her a funeral at home. They put her in a beautiful white coffin, which reflected her purity and innocence. Seeing her laying there, Roberta decided to take the girl out of the coffin to hug her and cuddle her for one last time. She couldn't bear to be separated from her child again, and above all she wanted to warm her cold little body. Miguel, seeing this heartbreaking scene, proceeded to sit next to Roberta and hug her. He tried to make her feel as much love as he could. But Roberta blamed herself for what happened. She felt that if she had taken her daughter to get checked instantly, they would not be going through these difficulties. Miguel made her understand that she was not to blame for anything, because they had done everything possible to save the girl. The next day, they buried little Raiza, and with her went the heart of her beloved mother, Roberta. Faced with the death of a child, there is always the feeling of having failed, perhaps of having been abandoned. But this type of grief usually lasts longer than other, more normal ones. It is believed that this is the case due to the great emotional impact this type of death causes to individuals, since it is not only the loss of a loved one, but also the loss of identity. One aspect that must be considered is the fact that overcoming the death of a child is almost impossible. The unconditional love for them never disappears. Love never dies. We hope that this story has left you a nice message, especially perhaps that it has been able to help you feel a little more understanding of the feelings of loss experienced by other people like Roberta and Miguel, who had a hard time. Thank you for watching today's video. Please subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories like this one. See you soon!